African Americans have given so much to this country. They've fought and died in every war since the Revolution. They've lifted up the conscience of our nation in the civil rights movement.
What did he say?
Could you just answer my question?
George Zimmerman like he's some sort of criminal. He's not a criminal. He's
George
a guy
Zimmerman
who cares about his neighborhood.
shot dead an
He's a guy who
unarmed
cares about his
teenager.
neighborhood. He's a neighborhood watch guy. Don't you want people who are proactive? And there was crime in that neighborhood, Pierce. I live in South Central.
There wasn't crime from Trayvon Martin in that neighborhood.
The burglar bars are not on there because of George Zimmerman. They're on there because of the minority of thug in the community that's messing up everybody's image and reputation. This is why people profile.
Call it what it is. So
you actually think racism has never existed?
Right.
Do you think you could trace your family history back to a thing called slavery, or is that my imagination?
I can. A matter of fact,
so you don't think slavery was racism?
No.
Call him his real name, what he's entitled to, and that's a Sambo.
The black people. I think you're stupid for saying that kind of thing to try to get black people.
That wasn't my question.
That race and racism.
Do you think racial genitalia?
When it doesn't.
Do you
racism
think she's
is not
stupid,
a major problem
Larry?
in America anymore, Pierce. Racism is not a major problem in America anymore. The number one problem facing black people are the large.
Are most black Americans suffering due to racism or the lack of moral character?
Well, it is a false equivalency. It is neither. It is.
So they're not suffering due to racism.
It is both.
And they're not suffering.
More than both.
But you give me too many answers.
That's all you can get, though. I mean, everything's not a soundbite. There are some things.
No, I want to know, is it yet, are they suffering due to racism or the lack of moral character?
It is not either or.
So they're
both.
not suffering due to racism and they're not suffering due to the lack of moral character.
It is both and some more. Does racism affect black employment? Yes. Are there other things that affect black employment? Certainly there are. Racism is one of them. Perhaps some character issues, depending on who the person is.
Let me go back to this. First, I want to say that racism doesn't exist. It's an illusion. What do you say about that?
I say that's silly.
You say that's silly?
Yes, sir.
Why do you say it's silly?
Well, I've been called names enough to know that racism exists.
But that could be because they just hated you. They made a judgment and they hate you, not because of your color, they just hate you.
Uh-huh.
Do you ever have fights with family members?
No, I refuse.
But you know family members do fight, right?
Sure.
And is that racist?
Not necessarily, no.
And so why is it that when blacks and whites fight is racism?
You're oversimplifying reality.
Does the Bible say that we have a race issue or a spiritual issue?
I think the biggest problem with us when it comes to race relations is not skin, but sin. And so that issue of our problem starts on the inside. It's a person's heart. And
so the Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and wickedness in high places.
Yes.
Meaning that it has nothing to do with skin color. It has nothing to do with male and female. It's good versus evil. Am I right about that?
I believe you're right about that.
So then why should children of God go along with the children of the lie and call it racism when it's really not racism, something that doesn't exist, never has existed, and because it doesn't exist, we can't solve it. Why not call it what it is? So
you actually think racism has never existed?
Right.
Do you think you could trace your family history back to a thing called slavery, or is that my imagination?
I can. A matter of fact,
so you don't think slavery was racism?
No.
Why were you a slave?
Because they just happened to own me. But let me tell you
But
this.
it had nothing to do with your race.
Well,
is there a reason why the preponderance of slaves in America, they were just accidentally black?
But you know, white people have been enslaved as well by other whites, right? Is that racism?
Probably not, no.
Yes or no?
I said probably not.
I know, but I need a yes or no. You're a pastor, so I want to try to help people.
It can be.
But is it?
You'll have to check his heart. I don't know. The reality is the preponderance, the most of white on black slavery was racism.
How do you know that?
If you read the writings, if you read the diaries, if you check the historical statements made by the folks who held the slaves, the disrespect, the disregard, making them
black people did other blacks worse than that.
Making them not a person, then 3/5 of a person. That is racism. It was institutionalized, codified right there in the Constitution.
That was for the power of the vote.
Of course it was, but it's still racism, regardless of what your motive is.
Let me move
racism.
on. Morality. I say that most black Americans are suffering not because of racism, but the lack of moral character. Most blacks are immoral. Do you disagree with that?
I think that's a stupid statement, sir, with all due respect.
And do you disagree?
I definitely disagree, yes.
And why do you disagree?
Well, to say that most blacks are immoral, I disagree because it compares, it by virtue of the context in which you say it, it is in comparison to whites. I think that's what you're saying.
I wasn't thinking that way, but okay.
Well, I mean, you have to have some context to it.
But you disagree with me, right?
Oh, yes.
72% of black babies are born out of wedlock today.
And what's the percentage of white babies born out of wedlock?
Is that immoral?
What percentage of white babies are born out of wedlock?
Answer my question first.
I happen to know.
But is that immoral?
It's definitely immoral.
So these blacks who are having these babies are carrying out, performing an immoral act, right?
Uh-huh.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Black on black crime out of control in most of the cities. Is that immoral?
I couldn't call that necessarily immoral.
It's not immoral?
It depends on what crime, who's participating in it, how many people. You know, you went from the one about the babies and you left a question unanswered.
What was that?
The majority of white babies are also
born out of wedlock.
Well,
why are you bringing up whites when we're talking about blacks?
Well, because why are you picking on blacks?
I'm not.
Why,
I'm not picking on blacks.
I mean, it's an American problem.
Trying to help blacks.
See, why are we talking about racism then? Because it's an American problem, not a black problem.
It's not an American problem.
It is an American problem.
The
majority of babies in America now are born out of wedlock.
But see, we're talking about the issues of black Americans today. And how are you going to help them if you justify their bad behavior?
Oh, nobody's justifying.
By pointing out what white people are doing, because blacks are already blaming everybody else for their problems instead of themselves, so they're not getting better.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I brought you here, to make them focus on themselves and stop talking about what the white man is doing.
Okay. Black people who are focusing on yourself, stop.
But no, you are pointing out, when I ask you about immorality and all this stuff, you pointed out what the white man did.
No, I only did it because you are, by definition, comparing black people to whites.
I'm not.
Well, by definition.
No, I'm not comparing them at all. I'm talking about the way that God wants us to live as a people if we want to survive on earth.
Call him his real name, what he's entitled to, and that's a Sambo. Any black person sells his own people out and will do them in, he is a Sambo. Now, what is a Sambo again? Going back to Meritorious Manumission in 1710, the whole conditioning process, the whole brainwashing system, the whole social engineering system says that you must teach black people to see the world through the eyes of whites. You must see everything through their eyes. You must accept their values, their superiority, whatever they think and feel, and that way we got you contained. And that's why when you see somebody like Colin Powell, somebody running for office, they say, well, you can run for office if you see the things the way we want to see them. If you want to be conservative, you can run for office. If you want to place a lot of importance on abortion, you can run for office. If you want to talk about being anti-taxes, you can run for office, which means if you see things the way we see them as a black person, you're safe. You always had a black guy, a black slave, was running down the road saying, "Master, master, here comes the army. Let's hide our silver and gold." And you all say, "Our?" How did it get to be our? You know, he always wants to say something that doesn't even belong to him. And that showed up all through history. And today you got the same kind of personality doing it. And now he's not saying let's hide our silver and gold. He's called himself a conservative. I'm also against affirmative action for black folk. I'm against quotas. I'm against preferential treatment. Even had one running around talking about he wanted to pass a law to stop black folk from discriminating against whites. You still got that kind of personality that always wants to protect something, protect the strong. You always got that kind of Sambo personality. And nowadays, The best way to get rich is to say, I'm gonna practice that masters, gold and silver, and I'm gonna be against them black folk. I guarantee I can get you a radio talk show.
And the station manager calls, and he says, I heard you today. He said, you were amazing. I said, I was? Oh my God, you were funny, you have a good voice, you took difficult positions, you defended them without losing your temper. Have you ever thought about doing talk radio? And I said, no. He said, I've got a guy going on vacation next week. Will you sit in for him?
I get you a television show.
Instead of being angry at George Zimmerman, be angry at the minority of the thug who's committing these kinds of crimes.
Okay, if I could jump in again. So just to clarify, though, Trayvon Martin wasn't committing crimes in that neighborhood, was he?
It was an unfortunate incident. Two people had preconceived notions about each other. It never should have been happened. Doesn't make George Zimmerman a criminal.
I could even get you an appointment to the Supreme Court. Okay?
Well, hello there, children. I'm Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Notice anything interesting? For example, that I'm the only black face on the Supreme Court? You'd think my presence would bode well for minorities, right? Ha! Think again. Did you know that I hate my own kind? It's true. For example, thanks to affirmative action, I was able to get my law degree from Yale. But every single chance I get, I vote against affirmative action because I don't believe you raggedy niggas should have the same opportunities I had. I even voted for gutting the Voting Rights Act that Martin Luther King worked so hard to get passed because I can't stand seeing black people have a voice in the political process. I mean, I should have a voice in the political process because I'm special, but poor blacks shouldn't because fuck you, that's why. I was put on the Supreme Court after giving George W. Bush a handjob in the back of his limousine, so I'm on the court for life. No, I'm kidding. It was a blowjob.
You tell me how many black folk you want to sell out, and I guarantee I'll show you how to make money.
Now let me give you the Cliff Notes version of how I got into radio. I'm a lawyer, as Jesse mentioned, and I was running a small business in Cleveland, Ohio, even though I'm from here. And I wrote an op-ed piece that got published in the newspaper. And the piece was about government being too large, taxing too much, regulating too much. And then I had one paragraph that said, and by the way, racism is no longer a major problem in America anymore. So I get a phone call from a producer of a radio show. He didn't care what I said about taxes, didn't care what I said about regulation. All he cared about was what I said about racism not being a major problem in America anymore. And for somebody black to say that about 25 years ago was revolutionary. He asked me if I would come on his guy's radio show and talk about it. So I was on the show for an hour. Now that I'm in talk radio, I know that when you have a guest on for a whole hour, that is an eternity. Normally you book somebody for one segment. If they stink, you can get rid of them. He had me on for a whole hour. And Cleveland is 50% black, so almost every phone call came from a black person. And I got called an Uncle Tom, a bootlicking Uncle Tom, foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom, Sambo Tom, coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside, Oreo, same concept, the Antichrist, and then the name that you really call a black person when you really want to hurt his feelings, Republican. So I get back to my office. I said, I'll never do this again. And the station manager calls. And he says, I heard you today. He said, you were amazing. I said, I was? Oh my God, you were funny. You have a good voice. You took difficult positions. You defended them without losing your temper. Have you ever thought about doing talk radio? And I said, no. He said, I've got a guy going on vacation next week. Will you sit in for him? I said, no. He said, why? I said, I don't like being yelled at. I don't like being called a bunch of names. No, thank you. He said, are you married? At the time I was. He said, do me a favor, go home to your wife, talk this over, and I think maybe she'll convince you to change your mind. I said, I'll do that, but I doubt that she'll change my mind. So I went home to my then wife, Cindy, and I told her about this. She said, what do you think about talk radio? I said, I know very little about it. What little I know is it seems shallow, glib, and stupid. She said, it is. You'd be good at it. So I did it, fell in love with it. I met Dennis Prager. I got a 2-day audition at KBC, and I've been in talk radio now for about 25 years.
His famous tap dance.
I came across your show one day just clicking.
Welcome home.
No, I'm not at all in your corner.
Why not?
All.
Why not?
First of all, I think you downgrade black people every time you open your mouth.
What do I say about most blacks that's not true?
Everything.
Like what, for example?
We don't know, black people don't know about God.
You do know about God, but you don't believe in God.
No, how are you going to tell people what they believe in?
By their action.
You don't know all black people.
By their fruits, you can tell.
You're doing just what you accuse black people of doing. You're taking a small subsection of a race and you're putting everybody in the same bag.
Is 90% a small subsection?
You don't know 90% of black people.
96%. I'm sorry, 96%.
You don't know 96% of black people.
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
Let me tell you how. 96% of black people vote for the Democratic Party. They voted for Barack Obama twice. Is that a small subsection? And can you believe in God? Can you believe in God and vote for a godless man like Barack Obama?
What makes him godless?
Everything.
Oh, no, that's your opinion.
No, no, no.
So everybody, all black people should have your opinion?
Yes.
Oh, God. What do you sound like?
Like
you sound like an idiot.
Ooh.
The white man has sure fed you well. That's all I can say.
You know what?
They have sure fed you well.
Let me explain to people what you
you
mean.
Explain it to yourself.
Because what black
with
people,
common sense don't listen to your bull crap.
let me just say this to white Americans. Most black people don't believe that other blacks can be independent, free thinkers, or stand up.
You definitely don't.
Or stand up for what is right. They believe that if a black person stand up for what is right, they'll sell out. They're Uncle Tom. The white people have to be brainwashing them. Isn't that right, Lenore?
No, it's not right.
It is.
Don't try to twist what I say.
But that's what you're saying.
Your narrative. That is not what I'm saying.
That is what you're saying.
You can't tell me what I'm saying.
I know you, Lenore. That's what you're saying.
You don't know me.
You sound like all of them.
Oh, yeah. Okay, and guess what? You sound like all them Uncle Toms. Now,
See
how
there?
about that?
I knew it. Lenore,
now,
it's good to hear from
that?
you. It's good to hear from you.
Go drop dead.
All right.
I want to begin, though, with a conservative radio host who calls the Zimmerman trial a sideshow. Larry Elder is the host of The Larry Elder Show on KABC and also the author of Dear Father, Dear Son, and he joins me now. Larry Elder, welcome to you.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
You've been pretty scathing about my interview with Rachel Jeantel. Why?
I was, because you weren't doing her any favors by condescendingly trying to convince her that she's a victim. This is a young lady who didn't apply herself, a 19-year-old who's still in high school. Instead of saying, young lady, take this as an opportunity to take stock of your life, you treated her like she was a victim. And that's how you're doing this whole thing about race and racism. 7,000 murders last year, Pierce, of black people. Almost all of those were committed by black people. Since Trayvon Martin has his unfortunate death, there have been 480 blacks killed in Chicago alone. 75% of those crimes have been unsolved. Where are the cameras? Where are the shows? It's outrageous to act as if Black America should fear some non-black guy stalking some black kid at night. The likelihood of a black person being killed by a non-black person is extremely remote, which is why this became a big national issue in the first place, Pierce.
Right. It's perfectly possible, as we have shown on this show many times, to be just as exercised by what is happening in Chicago, which is an absolute national disgrace to America, frankly, in terms of the outlandish.
But you're not, Pierce.
No, but I am.
There's 7,000 murders last year.
I don't think you watched my show, Larry.
Wait a minute.
I don't think you watched my show.
Half of the murders in this country are committed by black people, even though black people are 12% of the population, which means 6% of the population is committing almost half the murders. And you throw out the old people and the young people, Pierce, you're talking about 3% of the population committing almost 50% of the murders.
Fine.
This is
the
why
point I was going to
commonsensical people
Larry,
profile.
if you just calm down for a moment, Larry, here's the point I was going to make.
I'm quite calm. I'm just bothered by how you're handling all
Larry,
this, making blacks
let
feel
me
as if
speak,
they're under
Larry.
siege. It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Larry,
you're a liberal guy, bleeding heart liberal person. You think you're doing something for black people. You're not. You're making black people feel as if they're under siege. And it's not true. It's an outrage.
Thank you, Larry. If I could just get a word in, that would be great.
Sure.
Here's my point. I completely agree with everything you're saying about Chicago. All right, let's just get that on the table. I've been saying this repeatedly on this show. It's a disgrace what's happening in Chicago, particularly with all these young black teenagers killing other young black teenagers. And the president and people down have to deal with it. But let's get back to the Zimmerman trial. Let's get back to my interview with Rachel Jeantel, because you tweeted some ridiculous things. You tweeted at one stage, would I like Rachel Jeantel to fly my plane? Why would you say that?
I'll tell you why I said that, Pierce. I'll tell you why I said that, because after you interviewed her, you condescendingly went on television the next morning and called her one smart cookie. Bull. Why don't you hire her as a nanny? Let's see how smart she is. It's a condescending kind of thing
You think
that a lot
she's
of white
stupid,
people
Larry?
say to black people. I think you're stupid for saying that kind of thing to try to get black
That
people
wasn't my
convinced
question.
that race and racism
Do you
remains
think
a major
Rachel
problem in
Jeantel
America
is-
when it doesn't.
Do you
Racism
think
is
she's
not a major
stupid,
problem
Larry?
in America anymore, Pierce. Racism is not a major problem in America anymore. The number one problem facing black people are the large number of black people born outside of wedlock. 75%. In 1960, 5% of all people in this country were born outside of wedlock. Fast forward, Pierce, the number now is 43%. You look at that for crime, dropouts, all that kind of stuff is connected. The other big problem facing black America, Pierce, is the economy. 1 in 2 black men does not have a job. And one of the heads of the Congressional Black Caucus once said, if a white person were in the White House, we'd be marching on the place because of the high unemployment. But we're talking about Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman as if it's the number one problem facing black America. It isn't even remotely on the top 10 list.
Okay, Larry. Larry, this isn't a sort of competition to see who can be the greatest filibuster in my show's history.
I'm not trying to filibuster. I'm just trying to make some common sense about what I'm not hearing on your show.
Let me just get back to the question I asked you and see if you can actually answer
Sure.
the question. Do you think that Rachel Jeantel is stupid?
I think that I would rather have a George Zimmerman living in my neighborhood, and maybe if George Zimmerman were living in my neighborhood, we'd have fewer Oreo Castros. I thought we wanted people to be proactive. I thought we wanted people to see something, say something. I know, I'm answering something different that ought to be answered.
Could you just answer my
George
question?
Zimmerman like he's some sort of criminal. He's not a criminal. He's
George
a guy
Zimmerman
who cares about his neighborhood.
shot dead an
He's a guy who
unarmed
cares about his
teenager.
neighborhood. He's a neighborhood watch guy. Don't you want people who are proactive? And there was crime in that neighborhood, Pierce. I live in South Central.
There
Every
wasn't crime
second house
from there
has
wasn't
burglar
crime
bars
from
on there,
Trayvon
and
Martin
the
in that
burglar bars are not on
neighborhood.
there. The burglar bars are not on there because of George Zimmerman. They're on there because of the minority of thug in the community that's messing up everybody's image and reputation. This is why people profile. Instead of being angry at George Zimmerman, be angry at the minority of the thug who's committing these kinds of crimes.
Okay, if I could jump in again. So just to clarify, though, Trayvon Martin wasn't committing crimes in that neighborhood, was he?
It was an unfortunate incident. 2 people had preconceived notions about each other. It never should have been happened. Doesn't make George Zimmerman a criminal. I used to work in the DA's office, Pierce. I'm telling you, it was a dog case, a reasonable doubt case. Nobody I know would have filed the case.
Yeah, well, we disagree, obviously, about that. I think it's completely wrong
Obviously.
that George Zimmerman should get no punishment at all for killing an unarmed teenager.
He's got serious punishment. He can't go anywhere. Are you kidding? He's a marked man.
Well,
he's going to be sued civilly. He will never have a moment of peace. He killed somebody. Morally, he's got to deal with that, Pierce. He recognizes that. He's not an
Larry,
he's not
if I
a thief.
may
He
respond,
recognizes what he did.
If I may respond.
Sure.
You know, some people would say that he's got it easy compared to Trayvon Martin, who he killed. So much as people feel sorry for George Zimmerman not being able to lead the life perhaps he wished he could, at least he can lead. At least he can lead a life. At least he can lead a life.
Wouldn't it have been nice to have had a George Zimmerman in Cleveland and maybe Oreo
I don't want
Castro would
George
not have
Zimmerman
good
doing
life.
my neighborhood
10
watch patrol. No, I don't.
For 10 years,
I
20
don't.
people.
I've got 3 teenage sons, Larry. I don't feel comfortable having somebody like George Zimmerman marching around as some wannabe vigilante,
you live in a
armed
wealthy
with a
area,
gun,
gated community,
potentially killing my kids
live in a
as they
wealthy
come
area,
home from a
gated community,
store with a bag of Skittles and
plenty
a
of
can of
security.
soda. No, I don't. I don't feel comfortable.
You live in a wealthy neighborhood, gated community, plenty of security. You don't have to worry about that. Live in South Central. Come down to South Central sometime. See what's going on down there. They're not worried about George Zimmerman. They're not worried about Mark Furman. They're worried about the thug down the street coming from a single-parent household. And that situation has been created by the left-wing people like you who feel sorry for people, and therefore you want government to take care of them. And move on. Instead, this big racial thing, he loses his team. For crying out loud, Jeff. Marge Schott, the owner of the Reds, said my $1 million N-word. She had a Nazi collection of memorabilia. She wasn't banned for life. George Steinbrenner wasn't banned for life. He was a convicted felon. He wasn't banned for life.
Different league, different sport, different amount of African Americans involved in the sport. 80% of basketball players are African American, and don't you think that that for Donald Sterling to say the things that he did means that he's incompatible with that league?
Jeff, tell me the worst thing that he said, please. What is the worst thing that he said? The worst thing he said was, "Don't bring your black friends to the games. The black friends can go, just don't have them sit next to you. If Magic wants to go, don't have them sit next to you." For that, he loses his team? Two people out of 15,000 can't go? He loses his team?
Well, he also had plantation speak going on in there, that he gives blacks homes, he gives them cars, that he provides
do the checks
for them.
bounce? Do his checks bounce?
No, his checks don't bounce. His
And
words
these
do,
players,
however.
and these players, Jeff, that had this press conference and talked about what a bad guy Sterling is, are they going to ban players from going to the bank and cashing these checks?
So Larry, I'm a little confused. So you believe that his
I
words...
think it's no big deal.
Kudos to Donald Trump. These American ghettos are hellholes, and Donald Trump is the only one that wants to talk about this.
Larry Elder, Donald Trump is making a huge effort, more than any other presidential candidate I can think of in recent memory.
I'm too hot to handle. I rock your mantle when I play 112 and lights